The Obama administration attempts to mop up its mess after turning its back on our greatest ally, Israel. But it only made things worse today. Earlier, Secretary of State John Kerry delivered what seemed like a never-ending address, defending the administration's decision to let the UN condemn Israel for building settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. It was a stunning scene to watch America's top diplomat publicly rebuke our longtime friend.
Because the two-state solution is the only way to achieve a just and lasting peace between Israelis and Palestinians. It is the only way to ensure Israel's future as a Jewish and democratic state. It is the only way to ensure a future of freedom and dignity for the Palestinian people. Regrettably, some seem to believe that the U.S. friendship means the U.S. must accept any policy, regardless of our own interests, our own positions. They fail to recognize that this friend, the United States of America, that has done more to support Israel than any other country.
A short while later, Israel's prime minister fired right back. Benjamin Netanyahu outraged that Secretary Kerry would be critical of his country at a time when the Middle East is going up in flames.
I must express my deep disappointment with the speech today of John Kerry, a speech that was almost as unbalanced as the anti-Israel resolution passed at the UN last week. In a speech ostensibly about peace between Israelis and Palestinians, Secretary Kerry paid lip service to the unremitting campaign of terrorism that has been waged by the Palestinians against the Jewish state for nearly a century. What he did was to spend most of his speech blaming Israel for the lack of peace by passionately condemning a policy of enabling Jews to live in their historic homeland and in their eternal capital, Jerusalem. That it's a shame that Secretary Kerry does not see this simple truth.
Okay, a sharp and immediate response from Netanyahu regarding Secretary Kerry's remarks.
Unbelievable. Another parting shot, a hit job on Bibi Netanyahu by the Obama administration on his way out of the office. Why? Think about what's going down. So Benjamin Netanyahu came over here against President Obama's will. He sat down with Congress and said, I'm going to address Congress. Obama didn't like that. President Obama then turned around and tried to get Netanyahu, tried to undermine his re-election, tried to get him out of office, and then it goes back and forth. And this is President Obama taking the final shot at the expense of peace in the Middle East and our very, very important ally, the only democratic ally in the Middle East, Israel. I'm just blown away. Benjamin Netanyahu later on in that announcement said, the Palestinians reward Palestinians who murder Jews. And now we're giving them the currency, the Palestinians' currency at the negotiating table with Israel. It's insane. I don't know where our foreign policy is.
Heather. The curtain has finally been pulled back on exactly how the administration feels about the Israelis. And the Secretary of State spent the majority of his time really blaming Israelis for building settlements and claiming that those settlements and that was a part of a one-state solution, that Israel essentially wanted to take all this Palestinian land, make it their own, and there would never be a two-state solution. And so therefore, the United States had to come in and save the Palestinians from what the big bad Israelis were doing. Essentially what he said.
Now, Julie, how do you see this? Because this is kind of stunning in the fact that this is coming towards the end of President Barack Obama's administration, making these declarative statements, somewhat then muddying the waters in terms of trying to negotiate a peace settlement in the Mideast, and now we have this.
You know, what's puzzling to me is that in any relationship, whether it's foreign policy or personal relationships, you can't want it more than the couple, right? You can't want it more than the people involved. And in this case, John Kerry's coming out and saying, I'm going to force you, Bibi Netanyahu, to sit down with the Palestinians. And Eric, you're so right. These are people who pay what they call martyrs and what I call suicide bombers and other terrorists to come and blow up Israelis. They have not historically been good partners for peace, despite the fact that Mahmoud Abbas tends to say one thing in English and something very different to his people in Arabic. You know, you can't want it more than the two people involved. And let me just say this on a personal level. My grandmother lived the last 25 years of her life and died in a place called Gilo, which is considered to be by the European Union, by Japan, by the United Nations, occupied territory, the Israelis consider it part of Jerusalem. It's in East Jerusalem. This would be one of the questions, one of the territories that would be up in a final negotiation for settlement. I do not support settlements personally. But I don't think that the way that John Kerry has gone about doing this...
But why don't you support him?
I'll tell you why I don't support settlements. I think ultimately it is in the Israelis' own interest. One day, not with this particular Palestinian Authority, certainly not with Hamas, but one day I'm hopeful that they will have an opportunity for a Palestinian state somewhere on the territory of these settlements.
Who declared that territory Palestinian?
Well, first of all, there's no territory that's considered Palestinian because there's never been a Palestinian people.
They think so.
Ultimately, you're going to have to do something about this because if you want Israel to be a majority Jewish country, eventually, I'm not saying it's going to be tomorrow, but eventually, you will have to create a homeland for the Palestinians. Otherwise, you're going to lose the Jewish character of Israel. It's going to happen demographically. So to me, the point is this. I understand what John Kerry's doing. I don't understand what the point of it is out the door saying to two people who have no...
He's defending his boss and saying nobody's better to Israel
maybe, but
than
they're so afraid of the Donald
into
Trump administration and how they will handle Israel that they tried to pull the pin on the grenade. In fact, they did pull the pin on the grenade and threw it right there in the middle of Israel today. One interesting thing to note, when you heard John Kerry speaking about Hamas, he referred to Hamas as a militant group. Okay, which is very different from a terror group. By the way, the U.S. State Department considers Hamas to still be a terror group. This is the organization that encouraged attacks on Israelis. That was practically the start of a third intifada when they were encouraging them to go out and just stab civilians and run over and kill civilians with cars. And that was a huge problem that they had two years ago in 2014 and still have to a certain extent. But interesting that he used that language.